It's really exciting. We've had an 80% increase in the entire membership since I became leader, and people are telling me what it's down to. People are feeling hope. They can hear that I'm talking about the fact that people's wages aren't high enough, the cost of living is too high, and actually what we really need to do is tackle the inequality at the heart of our society. The four wealthiest people in Britain own more wealth than 20 million people combined. And the Green Party are the only party really talking about the fact that people are really struggling, they're tired and exhausted, and it doesn't have to be this way.
Right. I'm asking about your carbon tax.
No, but the reason why
do you accept that businesses will pass the cost on to consumers?
Well, that's why with energy, for instance, we need to look at nationalising the energy companies. And the reason why I'm saying this is because all of these things for businesses will make their costs cheaper if their energy bills are down. Those are one of the biggest kind of hits on businesses at the moment.
Sure. But are you saying you don't expect them to pass your massive carbon tax on to customers?
No. So I think what we need to be doing is finding other ways to support particularly small and local businesses. These are vital, by the way, for tackling the climate crisis. We know the big corporations are destroying our environment, our democracy and our communities. And actually what we need is that much more local businesses, those small to medium-sized businesses that actually can be rooted in communities, that are doing things for the public good. They can make a profit, sure, but this isn't about squeezing out every single profit they can make. And that's going on far too often with far too many huge businesses.
OK. Now, one of your signature policies that wouldn't hit most people is a wealth tax, an annual tax on people's assets above 10 million. Can you tell our audience how much you think that would raise a year?
So the estimates that have come out from the TUC and a group called Patriotic Millionaires, who are a group of millionaires saying taxes more, look between 15 to 25 billion pounds a year.
OK. Wealth taxes, as you know, have been tried in many other European countries similar to the UK. Spain has a wealth tax, which is quite similar to your proposal. Do you happen to know how much they raised in a year from their wealth tax?
No, I don't, but no. I'm hoping you can tell me.
Yeah, no, it's not a trick question. It's just interesting. It's about 3 billion euros, which is about £2.5 billion. That's in Spain. That is such a long way from your 15 to 25 billion a year.
Well, I think it's about getting the thresholds right and making sure it's done right. So
the Spain one is similar to your proposal.
Sure, but we're a different country. So we have the City of London for a start. There's an incredible amount of wealth in the City of London. So I think it's about making sure we're comparing apples and apples rather than apples and oranges.
OK. I mean, I've got a few more countries if it helps.
Sure.
Switzerland raised 9.5 billion euros from their wealth tax in 2023. Norway, 2.7 billion euros. They're just sums that are way down from what you're suggesting you could raise. And we've got Paul Johnson in March this year, formerly of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. No country in the world has ever successfully had a wealth tax that raised serious money. That's what I'm questioning.
And I think they're legitimate questions. I'd also say those aren't tiny amounts of money. So actually, whatever you're going to create from a wealth tax is ultimately about reducing inequality. This isn't about creating public investment. We can do that anyway. We don't need to tax the wealthy to do that. This is ultimately about tackling the deep inequality in our society. In terms of Paul Johnson and the IFS, they very much look to protect and maintain the status quo. And what I would say is the status quo, the economy is not working for almost anyone at the moment, unless you're in that top 1%
right. Don't you
of the wealthiest.
The IFS are independent?
They are independent, but there's been reports just last week around their connection with Barclays and some of the things that they've been saying. I think it's legitimate to question economists, no matter where they come from.
You want to spend a lot more on public services and welfare. I wonder if the wealth tax, you present it as a panacea when it's probably not. Is that fair?
No, I don't present it as a panacea at all. In fact, I don't even think it's close to a panacea. That's just the start of the things we need to do. We need to bring capital gains tax in line with income tax. And the reason why that's important, right now, if you're a cleaner, you could be paying more tax than the person who owns the building that you're cleaning. We need to tax unearned wealth as much as we tax earned income.
Right. I'm just wondering if you look at countries around Europe who spend more than we do on public services and have better public services as a result, they tend to tax the income of everyone in order to get those excellent public services, including lower and middle income earners. And maybe you just have to say to people, we're all going to have to pay for this.
We'll absolutely say that. I think at the moment, the moment we're in at the moment, people are really, really struggling. And so I think it's right that the focus is on the super wealthy. I think once we start to move to a better footing as a society where we have better public infrastructure and services, then I think it is legitimate to say paying tax is something that's actually patriotic. We should be proud of contributing to this country, to making sure we have an NHS that works, that we have public transport that works. And yes, everyone will have to pay for that. But ultimately, this is about where is the biggest burden, and that should be on the people with the broadest shoulders.
Do you want the UK to withdraw from NATO?
not immediately. The world is in political turmoil and we need to make sure our country is defended.
Right.
However, we've got Donald Trump in the White House. I would say that America has always been a problem in regards to NATO and American imperialism. But in Donald Trump, we have a man who Mark Rutte, the current head of NATO, says we should call him daddy, despite the fact he talks about turning Gaza into a luxury Riviera.
Well, he doesn't anymore, does he? I just want to come back to the beginning of your answer here, because you said not immediately.
Right.
Which suggests that at some point you want the UK to pull out of NATO.
Well, what I want right now is conversations with our European neighbours, because I think Brexit was one of the most catastrophic decisions we ever made, economically and for security.
But I think you've just told us this morning, ultimately, you want the UK to pull out of NATO. Is that fair?
Once we've created an alternative alliance with our European neighbours, we should absolutely be looking at a different way that is focused on peace and diplomacy rather than on nuclear weapons.
If one of our European allies was attacked by Russia and they invoked Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which says we must defend them, would you support the UK defending one of our European allies?
Well, we clearly have to, because we're in NATO, but this is part of the point. The Intelligence Council just last week wanted to release a report. The Guardian reported that it was sat on by the government because they weren't ready to deal with the consequences. What were the consequences? They said that the biggest security threat this country is facing right now is food insecurity and also looking at global pandemics. I think we need to be making sure that we're spending money on the actual climate crisis and food insecurity rather than £15 billion on nuclear weapons at the same time that our NHS is crumbling.
You heard there Steve Reed saying he'll resign if he doesn't meet this target of building 1.5 million homes during this Parliament. Do you think that's a target that he can meet?
No, I don't think it is, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I mean, on the show tonight, the Panorama show, you'll see people from all aspects of the house building world and the housing research world talk about that. I also think that when we have 172,000 children in temporary accommodation, a housing secretary focusing on build baby build hats and kind of making a joke out of that is quite tasteless. We know how acute the housing crisis is, and this government actually, to be frank, haven't done anything to really confront that. I mean, 1.5 million homes, whether they're built or not, is not going to help directly the 1.4 million people that are on the social housing waiting list, for example, or, you know, the 1 in 3 private renters that are in poverty after housing costs because their private rents are so high. Because really what we have is a lack of social housing and genuinely affordable housing in this country. And just building homes, however many they build, is really not going to help those people. I'm not sure who the government think is going to live in them.
Rosie, what do you say to that?
We have spoken quite a lot about prioritising affordable and social housings, 40% to be affordable or social, because, yeah, I think there's a housing crisis all around. Rent is too high. People my age think of home ownership only as a dream, and probably some of the biggest loads of casework that I have are people who are waiting for social or affordable housing. But the way out of this is to build, baby, build, and I don't think that's insensitive. I think it's recognising the problems that are there and making sure that we remove the blockers so we can get spades in the ground, houses built, and people to be able to have a home.
Okay, Abi, what do you say to that?
I mean, firstly, I would say that the discussion of affordable housing is, you know, affordable housing is a fallacy. It was a Conservative Party policy. It's 80% of market rate. And when market rate is unaffordable, that is not affordable. I would also say that reference to the housing targets of this Labour government, well, last week, Steve Reed cut the affordable housing target for London. That's a city where we have 1 in 50 Londoners who are homeless, and it has the third highest number of billionaires in this city. We have a fundamental problem of inequality in this country. And instead of the Labour government increasing genuinely affordable housing, which is through social homes, which, by the way, is really good for our economy. We know that if we invest in 90,000 social homes, it will bring £60 billion back into our economy. So it makes economic sense, but it also makes moral sense. So this abstract target of 1.5 million is not going to help the people that are on the streets, that are in temporary accommodation, and that are being evicted because of how high the rents are.
Abi, do you think the changes to the planning rules will make a difference? Do you think the private sector can deliver on these targets?
I mean, I think fundamentally the private sector is motivated by profit, right? So the kind of the concepts that they will come in and save, you know, the children living in temporary accommodation is one that I think is quite problematic. They are driven by profit. They've shown that. And I think it's interesting that we bring up the planning system here, because we know, research shows, that since 2007, there have been 1.2 million homes in this country that have planning permission, but haven't been built yet. So that's not a problem of the planning system. There's a reason why they're not being built, and you know, it wouldn't be unfair to say that that's because the profit margins aren't there. You know, construction costs have increased, inflation's gone up. But the fact is that that's 1.2 million houses that could have been built. We have 1.4 million on the social housing waiting list. You know, that gap shrinks a lot, but we're not talking about that. I think what the government are doing is shifting the blame onto the planning system when they could and should be investing in social housing, which really was the foundation to the Labour Party, right? They've departed incredibly far from that. And, you know, Rosie, you've defended there again these affordable houses that are being built or houses that are being built. Unless the people that are at the very sharp end of the housing crisis, i.e., as I said, the 172,000 children in temporary accommodation, are they going to be moved into those new houses overnight? I doubt it. And if they are, is that where they want to be living? Is the problem not that we are paying £70 billion of taxpayers' money to fund landlords because rents are unaffordable? That's the real problem here.
Right, Rosie, let you answer that and I'll bring the others in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say the specifics of what will happen to all of those children, but what I do know is I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but I did have safe and secure housing, and I think that massively changed how I felt about the opportunities that were ahead of me and to be able to grow up to live a good and happy life despite not being from a wealthy background. I know personally how important having safe and secure housing is for children, but I do think whether it's the rental market, home ownership or social housing, the way out of this is to build more houses. And like I said, I'm speaking specifically about my area in Kettering, of which is a big population growth area. We are building a lot of housing, and I believe because of that, I will see constituents who are on the housing waiting list in Kettering go down.
Dawn, you've been a victim of phone theft, haven't you? What impact did it have on you, and do you feel safe walking down London streets?
In general, yes, I feel safe. I think with your mobile phone, just you don't feel safe having that out in public. So like lots of people be looking at their phones with a map trying to find their way. I would have my earpiece in. But the police and the mayor have actually done a really good job with Operation Reckoning in tackling one of the biggest crime gangs that stole, they estimated, around sort of 40,000 phones and managed to break that up and get thousands of phones back. But I do think the tech companies need to play a bigger part, because at the moment I feel this is part of their business model, because when your phone gets stolen, what do? You go and buy another phone, and you buy the same make of phone too. And so I feel they've built that into their business model rather than saying, how do we make these phones less appealing if they're stolen?
Yeah, and you said the mayor's done a good job. Many would question that. I mean, phone theft has tripled under his watch, hasn't it?
Well, it's because of the phones that we have in our pockets now. They're like mini computers. They have our life on them. They have our bank details on them. That is where we've seen a rise. And it's in all major capital cities that there's been a rise in mobile phone thefts. I mean, my friend was in Egypt and she got her phone stolen and wasn't allowed to report it as being stolen. But that's another matter. I mean,
you're shaking your head there.
Absolutely. And I think, look, we've just heard the story, and from Dawn herself, about why this is such an intimate crime. It's not just a tech device, it's your entire life that someone's stealing. And if we go back a year, the mayor was doing nothing about this. All he was doing was calling on the tech companies. And that's why I have to give thanks to my colleague Neil Garrett and the City Hall Conservatives. He led us in trying to tackle this problem. And so you actually covered the work we did back in February in getting the mayor to speak to this. So we launched the YouGov poll, which showed that 63% of the people didn't think the mayor was taking this seriously. We launched that YouGov poll, which showed that 62% of people were also more scared than they were last year of getting their phones out. Also, really scary data that really scary data, around 25% of people wouldn't even report this. So we came up with the solutions, which is some of the things that the Met are now putting in place. The problem is it's a bit too little, too late, and that's the really unfortunate thing here. We haven't quite tackled this strong enough.
I disagree
and so
with that.
What we've allowed is these gangs. What we've allowed is these gangs to really establish themselves in London, and that is why it's a matter of fact. We are the phone theft capital of Europe. That doesn't happen overnight.
You see, I disagree with that attitude, because when something's being tackled and working, you have to look at it sensibly, right? Phone theft it isn't a victimless crime. It affects people's lives. And when the Met's doing something well, we need to say the Met's doing something well. When they're working with the mayor, we need to say they're doing well. And when we're saying that, I mean, I think we can do better in terms of legislation. I tried to put forward an amendment to the police and crime bill so that we ensure that tech companies take this more seriously, and they're not.